I'm your host today, Alicia Mackay, coming to you live from my house, where I expect the rest of you are coming live from also. It's so nice to have you all here for another online conversation about stuff that's going on. I love this. I look forward to this. I used to look forward to it once a month. Now I get to look forward to it once a week. How good is that? My tech has significantly improved. I'm now sitting here with 3 screens in front of me. I'm looking into a camera to talk to you. So I genuinely feel like a newsreader today. So I thought it might be fun to channel that as we go through. Where is everybody joining us from? If you could pop in the chat box, please, and let me know where all of your beautiful faces are dialing in from. That would be fantastic. Let's have a squiz. Oh, hi, Paul. Nice to see you. I know where you're coming from. It's the deep south. Oh, Thames, Brooklyn, Melbourne, most livable city in the world. I actually believe you were knocked off the top of the charts by Wellington recently, Georgia, but hey, it was nice to have it for a while, mate. Lower Hutt, Wellington, Karori. Got some of you in from Auckland, Hawke's Bay. Paul, I think you're the furthest south in Cromwell, holding the mantle for the South Island at the moment. We've got a very North Island contingent with us today. Oh, very good. Look, welcome everyone. No mai, haere mai. It is lovely to have you here with me again. And today we are talking about the new normal. Let me try my technology out. Oh, look at that. Can you all see a beautiful butterfly instead of my face? Not if you can. Oh, tech wizard over here. Okay, so we're here to talk today. I'm going to take that off now because it's much more exciting to look at my face, isn't it? If you haven't got, by the way, your screen on gallery view and you want to see everyone else's faces, not just mine, that is an option for you. There's a series of little tiles up in the corner where if you want to make it feel a little bit more like a meeting and a little bit less like a broadcast, you can chuck it on that view. Otherwise, if you would rather get the news vibe, and why wouldn't you, you're welcome to leave it on full screen and get a good look at my slides as you go. So totally over to you. And look, I'm hearing the phrase new normal chucked around a lot at the moment. And it's kind of true, and it's also a little bit misleading, I think, as a phrase, because there's not a lot that's normal about the way that a lot of us are living and working at the moment, particularly those of us on lockdown at level 4. And I think part of what's made this unnecessarily challenging for some of us, including me, is thinking that we can make it normal, and that we just have to tweak a couple of things around the edges about what time we work and what kind of communication tool we're using, and that everything's just going to trek on just fine. And I don't know about you guys, but that's not working particularly well for me as a concept, and it's not working particularly well for a bunch of the other people I'm talking to either. So I thought it might be useful today to throw a couple of rocks at the idea of new normal and actually have a good chat about what that means and what that might look like. So I'm quite keen just to hear from you, just in the chat box. What does your new normal look like at the moment? What are the things in your world that have shifted over the last 2 weeks that have challenged your idea of what normal is? A building zone. Oh, Lisa. Oh, more empathy than usual. Oh, Georgia, that's a bit nice. What does everybody else's new normal look a bit like at the moment? We're working from home? Oh, needing to connect, Amanda. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's like, I'll happily go 3 or 4 days not talking to anybody, usually, in my own space, and quite enjoy that. And it's a bit different at the moment, isn't it? There's kind of an impulse for that daily or more regular connection. I had a family Zoom call yesterday with my grandparents and some other members of our family. And like, I usually only see them a few times a year, but there was this really strong desire in all of us to just connect in on this video call yesterday in a way that we just wouldn't have done that a month ago. So that really resonates with me. Juggling whānau and work. I hear you, Debbie. Oh, I hear you. The whānau mahi juggle is real. kids home from uni, husband home from work. Oh God, it's all of them. Remote team. Oh, dude. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so not a lot that's that normal about the new normal at the moment. And a real, reduced social interaction, Marissa. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that depends on what the social thing looks like, because I'm seeing kind of two versions of that at the moment. Like one version of that is, we're not meeting for lunch and we're not meeting for coffee. But on Friday, I had 2 different drinks to get to on Friday night online. Like, I never have 2 party invites on a Friday night. That is unheard of in my life. I am not that popular. And look, by midnight on Friday, I was a bottle of wine down and like, it was all a bit tough. Yeah, more use of technology, absolutely. So everything that those of us with children have been discouraging our children from doing for the last 5 years, we now have to eat a whole lot of hypocritical humble pie on that one. Never been fitter. Oh, nice. Anyone else fitting in more exercise than usual? We have a chart on our fridge at the moment that has 3 key things that everyone in this house has to tick off every day. And it's go outside, exercise, and do a job. Because I'm not convinced that my children, all 3 of them, would actually get outside and exercise if they weren't ticking a box. Yeah, exercise for mental health. Absolutely, Marissa. God, I feel that. I went about 4 days last week without exercising and I was not that fun to be around. So I'm not going to do that again. Okay. So look, thinking about the new normal, it's a phrase that I'm hearing a lot, and I'm hearing it in the context of people saying things like, I need to adjust. I need to adjust to a new normal. I need to figure out what new normal looks like for our house. I feel like there's an opportunity here. I'm not quite sure what it is, or I'm not quite sure how to grab onto it. And I think there's a bit of uncertainty at the moment where we're not short on ideas necessarily about what we might do, but because time seems to have compressed so much at the moment, it's really hard to feel as though we can commit to a new way of doing something, because in 24 or 48 hours, everything's different now. And that idea from 2 days ago seems stupid now. Does anyone else feel that? Does that make sense to you, that compressed time? Yeah, got a lot of nodding heads. So we were saying pre-lockdown a week ago, can you believe that was only a week ago, that announcement, that it's kind of like dog years. And so Corona time and normal time are on different planes of existence, and the speed at which something seems entirely ridiculous or things seem a million years ago is just like this. And even the conversation, I mean, a week ago I was sitting here in my dining room with my practice manager, and we were doing our strategy going, oh yes, things are going to be different soon. We have to do some more online stuff. And it's not that it wasn't real, because it was, but within an hour, going from writing on the whiteboard some ideas to just, oh shit, this is it now. Everything is completely different. We've got to entirely transform. Man, that happened fast. So things are different. We need to adjust. It's really hard to grab onto something or feel confident making a choice about what that should be, because everything's moving so quickly. And I think I was guilty. I've thought about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Initially, when we started this whole online delivery buzz, everything's going to be great, there was a tone in some of my videos that I've looked back on in the last week, which in Corona time is like looking at a diary entry from 2 years ago, where it was very much like, hey, you know what? This doesn't have to be bad. This doesn't have to be hard. This can be awesome. This can be full of opportunity and exciting and new. And that was absolutely the vibe that we were in at the time. And I have a lot of that still now. But when I rewatched a couple of those videos a couple of days ago, I was left kind of looking at them going, yeah, okay, a week ago, Alicia, I believe you and I'm glad you're so enthusiastic, but you don't know yet. This is about to get hard. Because this is hard. This is really hard. And it hasn't even started yet. This is like, what, day 5? And I don't think it's that helpful to pretend like it isn't hard. And I think there's a real impulse when we are presenting in a public forum, whether we're posting on social, whatever we're doing, to do the whole, oh, look, here we are having our team meeting online. This is fun. Oh, here's a thing I did with my kids that I don't usually do. What a bonus. So many silver linings, and there's absolutely a place for that, and it's important we tap into that enthusiasm. But I don't think it's helpful to minimize the fact that we're struggling. I'm struggling. This is hard. And it's hard because, and this is what we're going to talk about today, this isn't just about making tweaks to how we usually do things, calling it our new normal and rocking on. It's hard because if we actually want to adjust to the way life is over the next 4 weeks, over the next 3 months, over the next year, we're going to have to dig a bit deeper, and we're going to have to confront change at a much deeper level. And I think that's happening on a bunch of levels at the moment. I think that's happening for us personally. And then I think all the way up, that's happening at a global level, where we're starting to have these really big conversations about how we interact with each other. What is work? What is the future of the way that we consume? What is capitalism now? What is the role of government now if they can lock us all in our houses? Like it's up here stuff, and it's in here stuff. But the thread that runs through all of it is that we're going to have to ask some bigger questions than maybe we first realized. And that's where I'm hoping to get us to today as a conversation. So I've done a whole bunch of talking for the first 5 minutes, and you know how much I love the breakout room feature, and we've got a lovely, tidy little group in here today. So I think it would be really cool, Nikki, if you can pop us all shortly into, let's say, just 3 rooms. And if we could all have a quick chat about what does new normal look like for us if we're asking bigger questions? Or what are some of the bigger questions that you've found yourself coming up against in the last week that maybe you didn't expect? All right, let's break out and have a bit of a chat. What are some of those challenging bigger questions we didn't see coming? Hopefully we'll all get it. Oh, I'm being invited to join breakout room 3. I'll see you all there short. Good to be back. Did everybody have a good conversation there? Yeah. So what was really interesting about the chat that I had with Paul down in Cromwell, and Jenny in Wanganui, and Kim in Rotorua, was we were exploring a bit of this tension between the short and long term. And we had a couple of different perspectives on that, where Paul is saying, look, we're a contracting firm. We're used to having capital works booked in, 18 months, 2 years out. And for us to be thinking at the moment about what we do over the next 4 weeks or 8 weeks is a real kind of a head shift here. And we're used to thinking strategically and long term, and this is a bit of a change of pace. And then Kim was talking about how, yeah, look, we can manage the short term stuff and keeping the wheels turning and the budgets being done and the research being done, but there are bigger questions here, like if we can't do short-term things like collect seeds for next year's forestry plantation, there is no next year's forestry plantation. And so 4 weeks now, but the next however many, how many years do trees grow for? You might have to chip in on me here, Kim. What's the timeline on growing a forest? I'm getting 10.
Well, 30 years.
Oh, 30 years, right. So this is hey, how does the next 4 weeks affect the next 30 years for forestry in the Bay of Plenty? And so what a fascinating interplay that was. Does anyone have any...
Wider than forestry in the Bay of Plenty, it's forestry in New Zealand.
In New Zealand. And Lisa's nodding and saying, yeah, we've got a forestry company. I'm so on your page right now, Kim. This is my life. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to share, that a bigger question that they'd heard someone else had confronted that was interesting to them? Feel free to unmute yourself.
I was spending quite a lot of time, this is the classic one, spending quite a lot of time last week I work in the park sector, and we had, if you would have seen lots of questions on the Prime Minister's update, you know, the session at 1 o'clock, when they talked about, so how long can we go outside for? Can we get in our car to drive to a beach or a park? What about the dog? And when the contact I had at local government New Zealand said, I never knew I wanted to talk quite so much about public toilets. So all these really basic essentials of life were up for debate. And it still hasn't, one thing that's so obvious to me now is that one person's common sense is not everyone's. Everyone has a different interpretation of what's appropriate. Yeah, so it's been an absolute eye-opener, and I think, you know, we're getting to a shared position, but it's sort of evolving through the community, a sort of community consensus around it. So we can put a message out there, but actually until the community buys into it, not going to happen. So really interesting.
Yeah, good reflection, Amanda. So I think something that I've been thinking about here when I've been thinking about this being hard is the difference between, you should be getting a black screen from me at the moment, don't panic, I'm about to fill it up, between change and transformation. And you would have heard me, most of you that are on the call today have seen me speak before, so you would have seen me speak a little bit about the why, what, how. Nod your head if that's a familiar framework for you, my why, what, how. Yeah. So when we talk about the why, we're talking about those bigger questions, the long-term vision stuff, the reason that we exist, our purpose. And when we talk about the how, we're talking about the way we do business. What are the approaches that we take to achieve our why? What are our systems and our strategies for getting there? And when we talk about the what, that's our very operational plans and initiative level. And what I'm seeing is a real spectrum, and you talked, Amanda, about the spectrum of where people are at and what's considered common sense and what isn't. And I'm seeing a real spectrum from looking at tweaking the what. So, we just need to shift our meetings to online and change a couple of things, all the way through to, will our business be able to exist in the next 3 months? What is our purpose? What are we here for? Do we still fulfill a community need? What are those community needs? So there's this real diverse range of where people are at with the questions that they're asking. And when we think about a new normal, we're generally talking about changes to our how. So that's that middle level where we're thinking about the way that we work. And I think most of the people that I've been speaking to, and certainly most of you on the call, are confronting very immediate changes in your how. So that's as simple as going from working in an office to working from home. And when we think about time frames, because that's such a big part of our chat today, what I usually say for the why, how, and what is that your why should change very rarely. So your why should change maybe every 5-10 years. It's something that we don't see a lot of shift in because it's our long-term aspirational vision. And our what should change every bloody day. Like, we should go to work, intend to do something, realize almost immediately that that's changed and we can't do it now, and that's fine. That operational level stuff changes every day. The why changes very rarely. Now the how in the middle, the way that we're working, that changes regularly, but not too often. And there are 2 triggers for how we end up considering changes to the way that we work, or our how. So the first one is kind of a regular review, and you'll usually get that as part of an annual review, maybe doing your annual plan, maybe coming together as a team for a strategy day at the start of the year and thinking about how you can tweak that. There's kind of a micro version of that around process tweaks, which generally sits more in the what level, but the how is something that we do semi-regularly as a review. What we tend to focus on in those reviews are process changes and tweaks, new strategies, or developing new business systems, maybe changing a procurement policy or adopting a new software for the way that we do customer requests, that kind of thing. But the second way that we're triggered to re-examine our how is when we have a significant shift in our operating environment. So that's usually an external shock. And Sometimes that's a funding thing. So in the public sector, that's often either we have a bunch of new funding that we didn't expect. Nice baby, Nikki. Very cute. Or that we have a significant reduction in funding. So there's a funding trigger is often a big change in that one. And I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, but I had 2 clients in the same week experiencing both ends of that spectrum recently, which was quite interesting. So I had NZTA, who just had that big infrastructure announcement from the minister saying, hey, 6.8 billion in extra transport infrastructure over the next 5 to 7 years. Figure out how to make that happen, which required a massive re-examination of how we do business. And then I had a local government client in Victoria, in Australia, where the rates cap was reduced from state government. And so they went from expecting that they could do a 2% increase in rates, or 2.5%, down to 2%. So with that 0.5% reduction in rates funding, they had to do a huge re-examination of how they deliver services to get the same output for less funding. So sometimes it's a funding shift. Sometimes it's a regulatory shift or a change in your market environment. And clearly at the moment, we have a massive shift in our operating environment. That is an external shock, which has been driven from a public health standpoint, but now has flow-on effects economically, socially, as far as legislation and the way we do business. So we're at a point in time where we've got a big trigger to look at our how, which is what that new normal is all about. Now, what's different about those 2 shifts is that when we are regularly reviewing our how, we often find that we are doing discrete projects. So it's, should we update policy? Should we update some of our systems? Should we look at a new strategy for X? When we have a big external shock shift and our operating environment has changed and we're being triggered in an unplanned way into re-examining our how, that usually means we need to take a much broader view. So rather than thinking about discrete projects, we're thinking about a portfolio level or a bigger picture level view of change. And that's where we start shifting from that change territory into transformation territory. And instead of saying, should we change this bit, which is I think some of us started with this process. Oh, we need to go from working in person to working remotely. We need to go from delivering workshops in a room to delivering workshops over the internet. Okay, that's an operating model shift. But actually, when we're confronting the kind of big external shock change that we're changing at the moment, it doesn't work. So we need to go beyond that operating model shift and actually ask those bigger questions and start reaching into why territory about actually, what is it we're trying to do here? Who is it we're trying to reach? What do they need? What should we be offering? How should we be working to meet a completely new environment and a completely new set of consumer, community, or customer needs? And so that's that real portfolio, business-wide level examination of change. And that's kind of the 2 main differences. And I don't know how many of you have seen this on LinkedIn in the last week, but I've had about 50 different people tag me in it. And if you haven't seen it, I'll send out a link at the end of this. There's this great chat, and it's Simon Sinek running a team huddle with his team and basically saying, look, kind of a plainer version of what I'm saying, which I guess is, hey, yes, we've got this massive change in our operating environment, which means that we need to think not about tweaking our systems, but about transforming our businesses. But he has this really reassuring message, which I wanted to bring up today because I think it's great, which is, yes, this particular example is unprecedented. So coping in a globally interconnected world with a pandemic of this magnitude is unprecedented in modern history. However, these are not unprecedented times. Before the public health crisis, there was an economic crisis, only 10 years ago. As well as those crises, there have been natural disasters. There have been huge social shifts. There's been massive technological shifts that have completely transformed industries, whether that's the internet, whether it's AI for some industries now. The magnitude of change that we're facing isn't unprecedented, and we do know how we can get through things like this. And it's around re-examining the purpose behind what our organisations are here to do, and then taking a really broad radical, brave view about what needs to change to meet that. And what that will mean is that there will be organisations that will completely pivot. There will be some that won't step up to the plate and will disappear. And there will be new organisations that emerge from the ashes almost, that completely change our landscape. And he uses, you know, kind of those cliche examples of Uber and Airbnb, or the Blockbuster to Netflix, just saying, hey, we have experienced change of this magnitude and we've coped with it. Our challenge as individuals and as organisations is to recognise what level we need to be changing at and step up to it. Because if we don't, it's not going to work out very well. So if you haven't seen that chat, it's absolutely worth taking a look at, and I will send it out because it's very good. So the metaphor I kind of like to use for this one is, so there's the cliche one around, do we want faster horses or do we want to invent a car? But I think a more useful one here is to think about metamorphosis and transformation, and to think, okay, do we want like faster caterpillars, or are we going to be butterflies? Are we actually going to go into a period of reflection where we take the time to explore and evaluate everything that we're doing and re-emerge from this transformed, and not expect that we can hit pause for now and have a temporary new normal that we then pop back out to how we were a few weeks ago, but actually recognize it is unlikely and undesirable that we come out of this the same as we were before. That we should expect things to be entirely different, and that our new normal will be an entirely new normal. And certainly in my team and in my household, embracing that mindset and that mentality has been really helpful. So I'm hoping that I've got a bunch of butterflies on the call today. Have we got butterflies in training? Type yes in the chat box if you're down with being a butterfly rather than a caterpillar. Yeah, all right, okay, brilliant. I'm speaking to the right people here. And I think what's really useful here, or what is really helpful, is to think about the fact that actually the brakes are off. So what's really interesting about transformation is that it gets a bad rap because we're not very good at it. And the reasons we're not very good at it is because usually we have lots of brakes that stand in our way, right? And I talk about these things a lot when it comes to strategic change. We find it really hard to transform inside our normal life because of a bunch of things. We tend to be too cautious. So, you know, we're a bit afraid and don't really want to take big risks. And so we slow things down. We have this kind of wave of business as usual inertia that just kind of acts as this like pouring toffee over top of any transformation effort, where it's like, yeah, we're trying to push change, but also we've got to keep things running as they are. And I've got a meeting at 10 and I'm part of this working group, which is 4 weeks into an 8-week process. And, you know, we've got a legacy software provider that we've got to finish the contract for before we can start another one. And we just have all of these barriers all the time that make it really difficult to transform when things are normal. We work in silos generally, and we're not very connected, particularly at a senior level where we've got 4 or 5 business groups that are running wonderfully best practice units that don't do a very good job of actually coming together for a big change. We're slow, we don't want to let people down. So there are all these reasons that make it really hard for transformation to happen. And we're in this really interesting zone at the moment where like the brakes are off. So a lot of those barriers that usually stand in our way either aren't there now or they're shifting. So when it comes to that silo bit, actually what I'm hearing from leadership teams at the moment is they are talking more often and more deeply than they used to, because they need to. They need that frequency of communication just to manage what's happening at the moment in the short term, right? And that overwhelming wave of inertia that comes with business as usual doesn't exist, because we're all running around setting up home offices. We're not in our usual environment. We're not looking at the same stuff every day. We're not dealing with the same projects. So all of that stuff that usually stands in our way is falling away a bit. And there's a lot to be said for a burning platform, because what comes with burning platform is a couple of things. And one of them is permission. Permission not just to try, but permission to screw things up a little bit. And that's really helpful, because we talk a lot about permission to fail or it being okay to make mistakes, but most of us work in organizations that pay lip service to that, but are pretty quick to act or to disincentivize the kind of experimentation that leads to failure. So we usually see a bit of a gap there between the walk and talk. But at the moment, I reckon we've got a bit more permission than usual. We're allowed to try things out and stuff things up a bit. And we've got a really big reason sitting behind us that's widely acknowledged to do that. And so the examples I used earlier about the funding changes in local government in Victoria or with NZTA's infrastructure funding provided a mini version of that, where we went, okay, we can recognise that things are different enough that we do get to try a few new things out. But we're at a new level now of, hey, absolutely everything is different, so we can be entirely different too. And like I said earlier, I don't think it's helpful to do the everything is great, lemons out of lemonade, silver linings, we can make this amazing. But actually, I just think it's really sensible to go, oh, we're in a spot where we could really change some stuff. And actually, if we don't, we're probably not going to do very well. So let's just bloody do it. Does that resonate with you guys? I'd be really interested in seeing some of your reflections in the chat on this and whether that aligns with what you're saying. Yeah. Changing at a micro level helps get momentum at a larger macro level. Totally. It's that cumulative effect, right? But then every now and again, we get to do massive stuff up here that just goes, woof. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. Yeah, awesome. Okay, we're definitely all on the same page with this one. Okay. Well, what I'm also hearing is, yeah, okay, good one, Alicia. We get it. This is the time is now. We can do all this stuff. Where do I start? Does anyone feel like that right now? Like, I've got 400 good ideas, but where do I even, yeah, cool. I'm seeing some good nods. Yeah, totally. And I think we're all kind of starting to reach the point and at different times. So some of us would have been here a week ago. Some of us won't be here for another 3 weeks, where we start to get that restless sense of like, all right, okay, let's do something. Let's do something different. I've got my office set up. I've got my kids doing whatever they're going to do. I'm ready to do something different. What should it be? And a framework that I really like for this one, and I'm going to, has anyone not read this book? Okay. Put this on your Kindle list immediately. So this is one of my favorite books. Let me do a bit of this. Look. Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Such a good read. It is brilliant. So Greg McKeown uses a frame in this that I think is really useful for us to start from when we start thinking about what should that change to our how look like. If this is transformation territory, how do we start? So I'm going to flip to that. So Greg talks about the difference between the highest point of frustration and the highest point of contribution. And the reason that I love this model is the use of the word contribution, because we talked last week about that sense of what can I do that we've all kind of been battling with, which is, oh, I really want to do something to help. I really want to be part of this, and I don't even know where to start. And so Greg's framing of contribution, I think, is just perfect for the kind of situation that we're in at the moment. And so what he outlines in Essentialism really is saying, look, the highest point of frustration that we'll experience, that restless tension of I want to change but I don't know how, is when we've got our timing and our reason and our focus off. And what that looks like is when we are trying to do everything. And the reason we're trying to do it is because we feel like we should. And the time we're trying to do it all is now. So when we're trying to do what's popular or what everyone else is doing, and we're doing it because we feel like we have to, and we're not totally focused about what it is, we're just giving it all a bash, that is when you will reach the pinnacle of frustration. And it makes it really hard to take action from that point, right? So frustration and action don't go particularly well together. But transitioning out of that and finding your highest point of contribution is actually about nailing those 3 key factors. It's about doing things for the right reason. It's about doing them at the right time, and it's about doing the right thing. And that really resonates with me, because I think if I look at my big long list of things I might like to do right now inside our current changing, crazy environment, I think, you know, there's some stuff here that is the right thing and for the right reason. but it is not yet the right time. It might be in 2 weeks, it might be in 6 weeks, but right now, this is not the time for that. Or there are ideas that I've had where I've thought, oh, this is the right time to be able to get in on this. Yeah, but I'm not coming from the right reason with this one. I'm not serving here. This isn't my highest point of contribution. And so using those 3 things as a bit of a test or a checklist for thinking about whether our ideas are the ones we should be focusing on now is a great place to start. And what I particularly like about the way that Greg McKeown explains this is he talks about asking better, harder questions. And so what that's about is about setting some higher standards at the moment. It's about raising the bar. It's about setting tougher criteria for what's going to cut it to be the right thing and the right time and for the right reason. And so rather than saying, what might people need? Or what could I do? Or what are others doing? It's about asking questions like, what is a really significant need that isn't being met at the moment? It's about saying, what am I so good at that it would be so valuable for me in particular, or my organization or my team to take action here? It's about saying, what am I inspired by? What lights me up? What would I love getting up to do now that I have to just walk from my bedroom to my dining room? What would I love coming in here to do every day? Not just what could I handle? It's kind of like the difference between the criteria that you apply to like a one-nighter versus marriage. Is that too crass for a Monday? It's like, yeah, you'll do. Which is quite a different set of criteria to, yes, I will live with you every day until I die. You know what I mean? And if you think about Marie Kondo's life-changing magic of tidying up, I think that's a really good example of that, because she's not saying, do you think you might need this one day? She's saying, does this spark joy? Do you love this thing? And the idea that if we seriously raise the bar for where we think about targeting our attention at the moment, we could really get somewhere. I like that. And I think it's a good litmus test. For those of you who haven't read the Derek Sivers blog, Fuck Yes or Fuck No. Oh, can I say fuck on webinar? Oh, too late now. Then you absolutely should. And it's about going, do you know what? We don't just go, might I like to do this or might I not? If you're not saying fuck yes, you should be saying fuck no. And I reckon this is the environment right now where we've got a bit of permission to be able to do that. Do you guys agree with me? Do you want to be saying a bit more fuck yes? Yeah. Yeah, nice. Okay. And then how do we do that, right? Because even if we've figured out where we think we should be seriously putting our attention, and I'm really keen to follow up with some of you guys after this and find out if you're using that criteria, what might make the cut. That's unhelpful unless we are similarly motivated to cut away the stuff that we've said no to. And I talk about this a lot, and I know you're probably sick of hearing it from me, but I'm just going to keep banging on about it, because change is not instead of. And if change is not instead of, transformation absolutely is not instead of. Oh, as well as. It is instead of. I'm getting myself tangled up. It's not as well as. So what we can't do is say, I've come up with this absolutely brilliant idea for the way that we can deliver services to our community, and we're going to do that as well as everything else. I've come up with this brilliant new offering that I think is going to light my clients up and really meet a significant need right now, and I'm going to do that and keep my other plates spinning. What we need to do is go, I've come up with this new stuff, and I'm giving myself and my team permission to drop everything else right now. And if there has ever been a time where you can do some dropping and you can do it with less guilt, it has got to be now. And so setting that tougher criteria when you look at your big long list of everything that's on your plate is the first step. Figuring out what needs to go now, what needs to be the fuck no, is the next step. But that's not enough either. Has anybody ever driven around in their boot? Say yes in the chat box if you've ever driven around with a bag of clothes for the clothing bin or the Sally's in your boot for more than a week. Yep. Yeah, lots of nods. I had a toaster in my boot for about 3 weeks over the summer. Every time I went around a corner, it bashed into the side of the boot. Dang. Oh, Paul Bissett says no, this guy knows what's up. Yeah. Because if we haven't actually canned something, all we've done is turned off our action on it. We haven't turned off the load that we're carrying. We haven't turned off the bag in the boot, and we haven't taken the mental weight off our shoulders. And so if we're really serious about creating a new normal, it doesn't just mean putting our meetings online, and it doesn't just mean launching a new service. It means identifying really clearly what we're willing to let go of and then taking immediate, decisive and permanent action to put it away. So whether that means making a difficult phone call, whether that means switching something off, whether it means sending a difficult email out to existing clients or existing beneficiaries of a community service to say, we're not doing this anymore, that's the thing that needs to happen. In the Marie Kondo analogy, it's the getting the clothes to the op shop or into the clothing bin. It's putting stuff in the bin. Okay. And I have a handy trick for how I like to do this. So let's say that right now, if you had a pen in front of you, you had 3 lists going. And one of them is all the awesome new stuff that I think meets my brand new raised the bar criteria for my highest point of contribution. This is the stuff I think I should be doing. And then your second list would be, here's the stuff that doesn't actually meet that criteria. Here's the stuff that if I was absolutely committed to saying fuck yes to, that it had to be the right thing at the right time for the right reason, I know in my gut doesn't actually cut it. That's your second list. How do you actually deal with each one of those things would be what you'd have in your third column. So if you had 3 columns, yeah, nah, then what? How do we actually deal with that stuff? And I do have a handy little kind of tool that I use for this. And so I am going to share that with you. And I call it the 4 Ds. And so for each of the things on our list that we don't think make the grade, we can apply one of the 4 Ds when it comes to treating it. Because if we're thinking about reasonable expectations in this, I think it's quite helpful to recognize that we can't just delete everything we don't want to do. And it's not helpful for me to tell you that everything can be deleted, because it can't. But that doesn't mean that you should be keeping it on your shoulders if you've recognized that it is not your highest point of contribution and it's not the best use of your time. Because if we are committed to what we can do and to making the most of our time, which I think has been more important than ever right now, right? Our ability to carry things in our minds is reduced. The amount of dedicated focus time that we've got to spend on our work and the things that we care about has also reduced because we've got other things competing for our attention, whether that's the news or our children or our spouses working from home or a load of washing that just finished and I can hear the washing machine singing when I was trying to finish the thing I was doing, or whatever that looks like. If we're still carrying all of that inside a reduced capacity, we're actually going to do less, not better. And not everything that's competing for our attention can be eliminated, because I've tried it with my children and they're still here. But there are a range of different things that we can do that get some of that invisible load off our shoulders. And so the 4 Ds that I like to use for this one are as follows. The first one is doing minimum. This is my second to least favorite option. The problem with doing minimum is that you are still carrying a version of this with you. However, you have eliminated a lot of the load by making a very intentional choice about how you do something. So there's a big difference between doing a minimum viable job or something on purpose and doing a minimum viable job on something because you came up against a deadline or you ran out of steam. So if there are things on your list that you cannot completely eliminate, but you don't think make the grade criteria-wise, then you can choose to do minimum. And you should be really specific about what that looks like. So whether that means reducing the frequency that you deliver something, whether it means reducing your operating hours, whether it means reducing your quality standards or the amount of time, money or energy that's being committed to a project, that could look different depending on what it is. But what we do need to be really clear about is what does do minimum look like and why we've done it. So that doesn't remove things off our task list entirely, but it does change our relationship to it, and it does reduce that load. The second one is to delegate. And what's really important here is that if we decide we can't turn something off and that we do need to pass that responsibility on, we need to do a couple of things. And one of them is that when we hand over the task, we also need to hand over the mental load and the accountability that goes with it. So it's kind of like me getting my kids to cook dinner, but then telling them what they need to cook, doing the shopping for them, keeping an eye on them while they're doing it, and then tweaking it at the other end. I have made life harder for myself when I've done that. The only way for it to work is for me to go, you're in charge of dinner tonight, pick up the stuff you need, I'll be in the lounge. Because if we delegate responsibility, we need to delegate accountability. But the other part of that too, and this is particularly important at the moment when we have fraught teams with less capacity than usual, is that we need to make sure we're delegating to someone who is genuinely able to do it, and that we are providing the tools and resources and support that they need to make that possible. So delegating a responsibility without giving any funding or without taking something else off their plate or without providing the support or access to resources that they need is a shitty thing to do. So for me to just leave my kids in the kitchen to set it on fire without leaving them with a recipe and some advice, or without sending them with money when they go to the grocery store, or without being sure that they actually know how to operate the stove, would be shitty on my behalf, right? So we've got to hand over the accountability with the responsibility, but we've also got to make sure that we have done it in a way that provides the support that people need. And that's particularly important right now if we're thinking about delegating to teams that are under additional pressure. So we can do minimum, we can delegate. The third thing we can do, this is my personal favorite, you might have noticed, is to delete. And if we've ever, I'm going to say it again, if we've ever had permission to do some deleting, this is the time. I had a mentoring client, a senior manager at Auckland Council last year, who got tangled up in 2 weeks of PSA union negotiations. And so for 2 weeks, he couldn't go into the office and he couldn't attend any of his usual working groups or committees or just kind of the random stuff he was tangled up in. And he had no choice in the matter. He was just in these union negotiations for 2 weeks. And he came back and we had this great conversation where we had this mentoring session where I expected him to talk about how much he was struggling with his time management and da-da-da. And he says, so here's the thing, I didn't go and nothing bad happened. The whole world just continued to spin without me. And he goes, do you know what I've done? I've just quit all of them. I'm not in there. Oh, I've just quit all of them. I'm not going to go anymore. And I've given my instructions now to say, I'm not going to be turning up at these committee meetings anymore. And I don't even feel guilty about it. And so I think that we get a little bit afraid when it comes to the delete. But we've got some license here, team. And so don't be afraid to use this one. It is the single most effective if you can. And the last D that you can use, so if you can't do minimum, you can't delegate, and you can't delete, the last one that you can use here is to delay. But I've got a really important point to make on this one too, and I think this one should be used with extreme caution, particularly given the circumstances we're in at the moment. Delaying for an indefinite period of time is problematic. So deciding to delay something without picking a date for when we pick it back up again is really dangerous, because it means that we still carry exactly the same level of mental load on it. We're still walking around with it. And now we've got an additional layer of uncertainty about when it will kick off. And we've created uncertainty for others. And so this is a really dangerous one. And sometimes it's appropriate, but if we decide to delay, we need to be very clear about when we pick it up again. So we can switch a service off and say, this will be back on in August. And if that changes before August, that's fine, but we have to put a line in the sand. And so I speak at a conference each year for the Association of Local Government Information Managers. And I was supposed to be speaking on the 11th of May in Wellington. And for obvious reasons, that conference isn't going ahead. But what I really liked about the way they decided to tackle that was, rather than sending an email out saying, hopefully we can run it again later in the year, They said, we've decided we will be running this conference on this date in October. And if ahead of time it turns out that that's not possible, we'll change it then. But this is what we're all working towards. And the difference in that level of certainty and clarity and reassurance is huge. So if you're going to delay, it has to come with a date. Has that been helpful? Type yes in the chat box if you've thought of something that you can delay, delegate, delete, or do minimum for. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad that's been of use, Paul. Yeah, great. Aisling, what is it that you think you can apply one of the D treatments for? Oh, I'm glad to hear you taking great notes, Lisa. That's fantastic. It's always a good sign. Anybody want to share something that they've done? Oh, operational policy team, delete. I don't mean it if you're on the call. I'm sure you're not getting deleted. Yeah, cool. Oh, thank you, Lisa. It was lovely to have you. See you later. Yeah, brilliant. Serious conversations need to be had for Melissa now that she's got her 4Ds in front of her. Oh, that's fantastic. That's really, really good. Look, I hope that's been helpful because I really do believe that we are in an environment at the moment where change is probably not going to be enough. We do need to be thinking transformation. And that's a hard job. And it can seem like an overwhelming job to reassess everything when there's already so much uncertainty in our environment. And so being able to get really clear about what our criteria is for what's good enough and what makes the grade, getting really tough on that because we've got a bit of license to do that. And then being really brave about what we choose to remove in its place and how we do that, I think is the ticket for how we really start to tackle that transformation. Oh, a lot of delegating comms. Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic, Amanda. That's a great example of using those 4Ds. All right, well, this brings us to the end of our webinar today, which is always a bit of a shame, but I do have an extra little bonus for you that I did want to share. And I've created a handy little pack with some of those tools and templates in it that you might find useful. So if you would like to have just a basic form to scribble on for some of this stuff, or you'd like a reference point to remember those 4Ds or how it is that we set priorities in the first place, you are more than welcome to head to my website, aliciamackay.co.nz/priorities, and you can just pop your email address in and we'll get a wee pack out to you with a few handy resources in it to give you a hand at a time when the more other people can do for us right now to make things easy, the better, I reckon. All right, guys, it's 2 o'clock. It's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much. Please feel free to unmute your microphone and say goodbye to me because I've been so enjoying your smiling faces.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Alicia.
Yeah.
Really great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, it was great to see you all.
Thanks,
See you later.
Alicia.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, Alicia.
Nice to see everybody.
Bye.